Hello, everyone. Welcome to this episode of Superintendent Spotlight. Today we're going to talk about the elementary science program. I think that'll be interesting for all of our viewers. Certainly know a lot about our high school program and how well our students do in the traditional range of courses and a lot of electives that folks perhaps don't know about. Certainly our scores are good and we get good reports from colleges about our kids. However, it has to start somewhere, and it starts for us, of course, in the elementary school. So I'd like to introduce my three guests this morning, and then we're going to talk about two topics. One is the next generation, as they are called, science standards and how they're impacting what we're doing, and then we'll come back to talk about the things that make science instruction unique in Hingham, even at the elementary level. So my guests, first to my far right, Katie Roberts, who's our Director of Science at grades K to 5. I'm very proud to say K now because this is our first year, of course, of full-day kindergarten, and science gets a lot more of the action this year than they ever have been able to get in a 2-hour and 35-minute program. And Katie has been in Hingham for
almost 20 years, if you can believe it. Almost 2 decades, possible. Yes.
But Katie also had some experience in science before she came to Hingham, and when she was here first, because you worked with the Museum of Science.
Worked with the New England Aquarium, the Museum of Science, and the Marine Science Center that's offered through Northeastern University.
Great. And next to Katie is Brian Conroy. Brian is new to Hingham. This is his second year. And Brian, you were most immediately before Hingham in North Shore? In Beverly,
right, yeah.
In a similar kind of role.
That's correct, yes.
But Brian also has science experiences beyond being a science coordinator and a specialist at the elementary level. Tell our audience about your summer job.
That's right, yeah. I've got a great summer job where I teach marine biology to 7th and 8th grade students at the Punahou School in Honolulu, Hawaii. So it's a marine biology course and gets us the opportunity to have the kids go snorkeling and do reef walking and go to Hawaiian fish ponds and all other kinds of outdoor experiences.
That's great.
Yeah, yeah.
The job everyone would like to have.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I get a lot of requests for assistance.
For helpers. And,
right. Yeah. And I might after this show. Get a lot of calls for that.
Good. And to my left is Chuck Cormier, and most people know Chuck as the principal at the Plymouth River School, but Chuck also has a kind of science background. You at one point had a role like Brian's?
Yeah, I did. I was a science social studies specialist in Acton Public Schools.
Okay, and then you continue with science education for teachers.
Right. I'm currently an adjunct professor at Simmons College, teaching a graduate level course in science and social studies.
Great. So let's start with this science next generation standards. I kind of like that title instead of the new standards or the standards of a certain year, next generation. So Katie, tell us a bit about that. We've heard a lot in the popular press recently about next generation. It's not so new, actually.
No, it's not.
So tell us a little bit about the history and how that drives some of the planning that we do, if not all of it, for our elementary science program.
Great. Well, I'd first just like to distinguish the next generation science standards from the Common Core. I think there's a lot of misconception about that because the Common Core does have some science literacy standards involved in it, but it does not have any science content standards. And so this next generation science standards was not a national mandate, but a national conversation by a number of parties to try to determine what every student, every citizen should know about science. And it was no small project, given the vast body of scientific knowledge, to really try to narrow this down into the essential concepts that all students and, again, all citizens should know. And so Massachusetts was a partner in developing these new standards. Massachusetts has been known across the nation for the strength of our science and our science standards. And so again, Massachusetts was one of the lead partners in this. Massachusetts elected not to adopt the next generation science standards wholesale, but our newly revised state standards are very closely tied, particularly at the elementary level, to the next generation science standards. And so here in Hingham, we've been studying these standards for a number of years and starting to develop not only our plans, but have actually begun some professional development and so on. So we are ready to hit the ground running when these new standards are adopted. And we're anticipating them to be adopted this school year.
Chuck, you've probably read them carefully.
I have.
And I would guess even maybe using them in your course at
I
Simmons.
do quite a
So-
bit, yes.
So what do you find most exciting about the next generation standards for
Well, first,
elementary
the
students?
organization of the document. It starts off by setting performance expectations for students, which is what students will be able to know and do, which is a little bit different than a standard. And then it's also subdivided and connected to those performance expectations with disciplinary core ideas, cross-cutting concepts in science and technology practices. What I like about it, because of its organization, it's moved us from a hands-on science program to a minds-on science program. So it's asking kids to really struggle with ideas and to form conclusions. And with that said, something that they're promoting that I like a lot is something called argumentation, which really connects well to the Common Core because it's saying kids need to be able to develop verbal and written arguments that are based on claims and evidence. So I think that's a real positive direction for us.
And of course, a term that we hear a lot these days is STEM, and most educators know what STEM is. I think we're also getting into STEAM in some places. But the talk of engineering is not something that the average person would think about when we think about young kids. So what does engineering as a part of science mean at the elementary level with the youngest kids?
Well, I think the engineering sounds like a sophisticated concept, but what I'd like to stress is it's what children do. If you've ever seen a child play with blocks, they are solving a problem and continually refining their solution to a problem. So again, this is something that children do. But engineering is the practical application of science. And again, it's one focusing on problem solving, so real world problems. And so what's exciting about the new standards is they've taken, instead of focusing on engineering as a separate area, they've infused it into science content. And so for an example, when students are studying the water cycle, which is a fairly abstract concept, they are challenged with designing a water filtration system. Very practical, hands-on challenge. Another example would be when students are studying decomposers as part of the food web. Again, a somewhat abstract concept. They're charged with designing a composting system for their backyard. And so again, taking those science concepts and really applying them to real-world situations.
Yeah, what I like about getting kids involved in engineering challenges is that it gives them the opportunity to not only show what they know, but show what they can do with what they know, and gives them a chance to learn to think by making things. And when we have been rolling out some engineering challenges for the grades 3, 4, and 5, and that was a response to the NGSS call to elevate make engineering more pervasive and elevate them to the same level as inquiry. So we've had challenges in 3rd grade where students were making tall structures out of straws. And in 4th grade, students were designing wind turbines, using wind turbines and thinking about the the way they could maximize energy transformation by experimenting with things like the blades and what elements they needed to change in the blades. And 5th graders did a challenge on making a catapult. So, you know, it was great because it's a real world situation where kids are manipulating materials. They get involved in the science, the engineering design process, which is kind of messy, which involves teamwork, and which is iterative. So they're always going back and, you know, testing, optimizing their test, and kind of redesigning.
So as I think about science curriculum, and many in the audience may not know that at one point I was the director of math and science, and so I remember some of the traditional units in science, some very grade specific, and in some cases kind of people felt strongly about certain units, like the butterfly unit,
Yes.
so on. So, but things are now changing with respect to the grade level units. So what's going to be happening? I know that we are doing a new unit in weather, for example, in the 3rd grade, and so talk a bit about the changing grades for the different activities.
Sure, I could take that in talking about the weather. Katie and I did a workshop last April with third grade teachers in introducing this new weather unit to respond to the new standards, which is calling for that to be in place for third grade. So we did a combination of both adult learning and the pedagogy on walking through these the activities in the materials we provided. So teachers were using a kit which is focused on having students make weather instruments. We also used another set of materials where students are doing hands-on activities to explore certain concepts like air pressure, changing temperature, wind direction, wind speed, and things like that. So they're making their own weather instruments and using them and other instruments to measure weather on a day-to-day basis. They're kind of studying things like air pressure, temperature, moisture in the air, humidity, just to understand those concepts by themselves, but also to see how they integrate. And they're doing a lot of daily weather measurement, like looking at temperature in different places outside in the schoolyard, because the standards emphasize having students use graphs and tables to observe, interpret, and describe weather at a given location at a given season.
We're also making some changes in grades, 1 and 4 coming up, so.
Yeah, so I think
tell us about those
one of the strengths of the new standards is before the standards were written on grade level bands, so a topic needed to be covered at some point between K and 2, or at some point between grades 3 and 5. And the new standards have defined this topic should be taught at this grade level. And I do think it's strengthening what the vendors are producing in terms of a kit, because it is age appropriate and it's grade level
Narrows the
appropriate.
range for their
Rather, really narrowing the
reading
range
level and all
down
those
for
things.
reading level and so on for what's appropriate for those students. And also really defining what's appropriate to learn about weather in third grade. It would be a different level of sophistication than at 5th grade. So I do think that's really helping us to be even more focused in our work. And so the other thing I think I really appreciate about the standards is the way it very specifically spirals from early elementary to upper elementary. And a great example of that are the energy standards. Our first graders will be introduced to the concepts of sound and light at a very young age to learn more about energy. And then in 4th grade, they will be expanding upon that knowledge, revisiting what they learned about sound and light, and then going deeper with magnetic energy, electric energy, kinetic energy. And so again, the spiraling piece is one that I think is a strength of the new standards.
And something I would think that teachers would welcome, particularly because we do have some assessment in science, not the same grade range as in the literacy and math, but some assessment. And I think teachers are always concerned because it has represented a cumulative knowledge. And this idea of spiraling takes, I think, a little pressure off any one person at one grade level. So kindergarten, we talked a minute ago about the fact we now have a full-day kindergarten in Hingham. Full day is 6 hours and 10 minutes, very different from the 2 hours and 35 minutes that a lot of people call the half day, never me. I always told what it was, and 2 hours and 35 minutes. So that took care of literacy and a little dabbling into the other subjects. So
Right, very little in science.
Very little. So what is that going to mean in terms of the
Well,
science curriculum?
I think we're going to see both a formal and an informal program developing. One thing that I'm hoping to see is our teachers using our nature trail more frequently, and with excursions out there with our kindergartners, and they're starting to do that now. And when I've sort of joined them and gone along, you just find them making these unique observations that they haven't had the opportunity to do, or telling stories about things they're seeing. And so what I'm seeing also is just a great amount of language development. If kids, young children are out there trying to explain what they're seeing and commenting and listening to their peers. So that little extra time in the afternoon gives us an opportunity to sort of experience science in an informal way. And then, of course, we'll be moving forward with more formalized programs to make sure that we're connecting and articulating well to the other grade levels. But certainly kindergarten students have a unique vision of nature, and their misconceptions arise very easily. And then our questions can sort of bring them around to what is real, and so it's quite enjoyable.
And just the idea of taking walks in the woods or playing in your
Right.
natural playground, which we'll talk about a little bit later, are experiences that many children don't have.
They really
these
don't.
days.
Yeah.
Hectic family life and more structured activities have taken the place of a less formal kind
Right.
of play and experiences.
Yep.
Great. So, when we make changes at the elementary level, obviously, they do impact what we do at the secondary level. And I think when we make curriculum changes, sometimes we start at the top and work down to say, in order to do this in grade 10, what do we need to start doing in the elementary? And sometimes we go in the other direction. But certainly changes at the elementary will impact what happens at the secondary level. And we hope that impact will be, what, in the 6th and 7th and 8th grade?
Well, what I envision, there are a couple of areas that we've been really targeting, particularly the engineering. That's something that we've put a lot of energy into the last few years. And so by having an earlier exposure to the engineering design process, students, once they hit our new grade 6 STEM program, will be able to go deeper with the design process. And again, in high school, we do have some STEM courses and also a new robotics program. And again, by having those early experiences, first of all, the students' interest will be piqued, and I think they'll be excited about the opportunities to go further. But again, having that basic understanding of the design process will allow them to apply it kind of innately in these new situations. The other area I think we'll see a big change will be in the physical sciences. I think that they've really fleshed out the physical science standards in the next generation science standards, taking some sophisticated concepts and addressing them younger. And so I do think when students reach middle school, particularly in the areas of energy, matter, chemical properties and so on, they'll have more of a foundation, and so we'll be able to go deeper with the middle school and high school standards.
Yeah, with the NGSS, what I have seen in its organization is how these very high-level concepts and core ideas are introduced at an early age, and you sort of wonder, what is that going to look like in a second grade classroom, but how it does build to middle school and beyond, and how the concepts are very similar, but just approached in a very different way.
Good. And Brian, certainly with your experience in 7th and 8th grade in your summer work, you have a good sense of what 7th and 8th graders are capable of, and can bring that thinking along. You know, in Hingham, going back to the years when I was the director of the program, I think we took great pride in the fact that we did a lot of hands-on activities. And I liked your comment a few minutes ago about science not just being a hands-on activity, but a minds-on activity. So obviously there's some change there, but will hands-on activities still be a part? Will we have to purchase a lot of new materials? How is that all going to get sorted out?
As you said, I think one thing is that this won't be a major change in philosophy or really in pedagogy for us, because we have taken the hands-on approach. And I do think that kit-based program, that materials-based program will continue. As Chuck said, we will be taking certain aspects of it further, introducing some new terms like the argumentation piece, and really helping students to flesh out their ideas more. In terms of materials, because we will be shifting some units over the span of several grade levels, what was appropriate for weather in a 5th grade classroom would not necessarily be appropriate for a 3rd grade classroom. So it will involve some new materials. However, some of the kits that we do have in existence will just need to be made some smaller tweaks. And so it'll be a combination of those two things, using the existing kits that we have and making some adjustments, and also researching some new kit materials, which is part of the fun part of our job. We enjoy doing that research and development and working with teachers on vetting new
those
material.
closets again.
Yes.
Seems that we just got the
We're
science
always doing
closet
that.
Yes, yes.
in each building.
The shift is interesting, though. I
It is.
remember when I first started teaching and working in science, it was all textbook, and then sort of a revolution happened in which we moved to hands-on, but hands-on was looked at as being very process approach and very much worry about the process. And now I think NGSS, and I think in Hingham years prior to NGSS, we're focused on high-quality nonfiction texts that kids can be reading. And so it's about also these big core ideas and how we develop them. So I see that's why it's moved to this hands-on / minds-on approach.
Yeah, I mean, I can remember thinking about science when I first started in the area, thinking about it more about this is the time we get kids excited about science. This is the time they learn processes and terms and so on, and don't worry so much about the content. But this seems to be a big shift and certainly a welcome one for someone as linear a thinker as I am. So, while we've all been talking, there have been some clips playing in the background. And Katie, what have people been seeing as we've been talking?
I was very impressed when I put out the call to our elementary teachers that I'd like to come in and do a few short video clips. I was flooded with teacher response on that, so I do appreciate that. And we do have a range of grade levels that are represented. Many of our clips are from 5th grade, from Brian's field science program, because that is one of the things that makes our program unique. We were sharing some of the new engineering activities, so some of the clips were from 3rd grade classrooms, doing a kind of a tall tower challenge, some of our 5th grade classrooms doing another kind of structure type activity. I believe we also have some clips in there of kindergarten students. Again, we're thrilled about that, engaging in science, and so we have kind of a broad range of grade levels that are represented in those clips.
I think we'll also have some footage of a 4th grade class at East doing some studies of bees, and they're actually using bees they have in their kit to pollinate the plants that they've grown in their classrooms. Yeah.
Not live bees.
I should mention that, yes. Hasten to mention that.
Bees are big in Hingham this year.
Yes, they are. They are.
Some that are problematic in one of our schools. And then we have a beehive at the high school. And a teacher who's a beekeeper there. We've talked a little bit about that, I think, in a prior episode. So the next generation science standards are kind of going on around us. I'm assuming that most districts are doing something to get ready for that. And so we're not unique just in the fact that we pay attention to what's happening nationally. But we do have a number of things that I think are unique about Hingham, so I want to talk a bit about them. And one of those is the fact we have an elementary science specialist, and we have Brian now full-time. We had for a few years, because of a variety of personnel changes and so on, we had some part-time people pasted together to make a role, and so we're really excited to have a full-time role back. And so Brian, tell us, you have a range of activities that are related to both the curriculum, professional development, and actual teaching. So tell us about what your typical day would be like, and in particular, the 5th grade field science program that we're so proud of.
Right, so the position is a wonderful hybrid of both elementary teacher support and field science teaching. And in my role as teacher support, I do a lot of work with Katie around planning the elementary science programs, particularly planning for the adoption of the new standards, reviewing materials for that, doing professional development in formal ways like the in-service trainings we did last year, or the full-blown workshops, say, for the 3rd grade weather. And there's also informal ways I work with teachers, whether that's doing a demonstration lesson or just popping in and co-teaching, or doing some research, reviewing materials for them, or doing some research, or making suggestions for activities or resources, providing materials, doing orders for each of the grade levels, that kind of thing. Or it might just be work particularly with 5th grade teachers around what I'm doing in field science and what they're doing in the classrooms and their science curriculum, and making sure there's kind of a nice overlap and that each of those courses is kind of talking to each other. And then in the other half, the teaching component is, it's a wonderful position because students are so enthusiastic about it. I don't have to work at motivation at all. I can kind of focus on, just organizing materials and organizing students. We're not always outside, but we are quite a bit. In fact, this fall, the weather's allowed us to get out a good deal. And I love this course because it's a combination of, I guess, life science, environmental science, but also nature studies. So it allows kids to do sophisticated science things like using microscopes, dissecting owl pellets, using guides to identify trees, constructing bones, looking at mammal skulls, things like that, but also to do the kind of open-ended exploration that you and Chuck were talking about, that students often don't get to do, going outside and just being curious in the outdoors. So we've spent a lot of time just around the school grounds. Even before going on the nature trails, we'll do a lot of activities in school gardens or just around. Each of the schools has such wonderful natural areas, even on the campuses. So we've used a lot of those areas to collect seeds and look at different kinds of seeds, to do leaf identification, to do leaf and bark rubbings, to look at insects and invertebrates. Plymouth River obviously has the wonderful pond where we do, which is the stage for a lot of our activities, particularly in the spring where we're doing water quality testing or looking at the invertebrates in the pond. We did a project early in the year where students were using digital cameras to go around the school grounds and take images of samples of life that represented each of the kingdoms of life. So that's kind of an overview. I think of some of the activities. Indoors, we can't be outdoors all the time, so when we're indoors, we've been doing things like looking at the structure and function of different organisms like birds, doing owl pellet dissection. We've made ecosystems, which students have kept in their classrooms to look at during the year, which is a great way for them to study elements of ecosystems, but also the water cycle. So I think that might give a flavor for what this.
And I'd like to just chime in and stress the importance of the position. I think elementary teachers would be the first to admit that they are not generally experts in science. So most elementary teachers are first and foremost literacy experts, oftentimes math experts, but they very much appreciate the support provided by Brian. And I think Brian has done a wonderful job of developing relationships with teachers, and they do very much feel supported, and I think that really strengthens our elementary science instruction.
And I think that's true across all the disciplines. We've tried to provide good teachers, hiring talented folks to come and work with us, but also to support them in that and to involve them in curriculum development and instructional strategies and all of those things. One of the other things that's unique and fits right in here is the fact that at the elementary level we have curriculum committees for all of the major subject areas. So all of our elementary teachers choose one or more of the different committees in math and literacy and science and social studies. And that provides a nice forum for us to do what we want to do most, and that is to be sure that every child, no matter what school they attend, gets the same set of experiences. And so how do we use those curriculum committees? Chuck, what do you think their value is?
They have great value in that I think they're on the cutting edge of new curriculum. They act, the representatives act as wonderful liaisons between the committee and Katie and the school. So when they're coming back to PRS, we're seeing them engaging their peers at team meetings around the new science ideas we're putting forward, the new units that are coming into play, and the planning that goes with it. So I see them taking a real lead role, and that teacher leadership is something that we've been trying to promote in Hingham and has great value.
And typically these committees, I know they may vary a little bit by subject area because the literacy one is so big.
Right.
The others are smaller, but typically they involve grade level reps or at least upper elementary and lower elementary.
This year we have been fortunate. We have full representation from each of the grade levels from each of the schools, which is terrific, and really does have a magnifier effect. There are 4 schools and 1 Brian and 1 Katie, so it is really important that we have these teacher leaders, as Chuck pointed out, that can help translate the message and really ensures our curriculum is consistent across town and also vertically articulated. So the teams are really helping us to do that. And most importantly, helping us to vet when we're researching new materials. There are reality checkers. So Brian and I might consider a kid is a great fit for second grade, but the second grade teachers are the ones that really can tell us this activity would work very well from a classroom management and materials management standpoint. This one here, maybe not so much. Let's see how we can refine that. So it's very much a collaborative process, and I think very much strengthens our curriculum.
Yeah, there's something to be said for a teacher coming back from a committee who's who's energized and carries that to their peers who may be less inclined to work in science, and so I think it's a wonderful stimulating effect for the rest of the team.
And it's not just carrying back the message that you give them.
No, absolutely.
It's also bringing back the fact that they've had some input and
Right.
that their peers have had
Yeah.
input into the decision making, which is around that idea of teacher leadership. So we have a lot of wonderful support in Hingham from parents as individuals in groups, PTOs, booster clubs, and different activities at the secondary level, but in particular with respect to education and projects and new initiatives from our Hingham Ed Foundation. So we want to kind of give them a shout out today, because certainly over the years they've given us some materials and grant dollars that have enabled us to try some things that we perhaps wouldn't have. So can you give me some examples of what the Ed Foundation has provided? Most recently, I think, Brian, you have new...
Sure, yeah, and absolutely. I think this is a great opportunity to give a formal thanks to the foundation for such generosity, especially for elementary science in the last year, because they funded two things of note for elementary science. One is a set of stereo microscopes for each of the 4 elementary schools. These are things I'd wanted for a while, and Chuck and Katie both know the benefit of them. The traditional microscope's a little bit more sophisticated than is easy for 5th grade and younger students to use. So these stereo microscopes have 2 eyepieces. They're much more easy to focus. They're more versatile. You don't need to kind of make slides. Kids can use them with, we've used them with every kind of thing: leaves, twigs, rocks, sand, insects. So we get a lot of use out of them just because they're so versatile and you can use them in so many circumstances. They're a little bit sturdier too. And then the foundation also funded weather stations for each school. Foster already had one, so they funded a weather station, which is a unit that measures temperature, humidity, air pressure, wind direction, wind speed. Also these data loggers and Wi-Fi servers, which allow this real-time data to be streamed through the internet. It gets poured into a website called Weather Underground, and then our school sites can link directly to that, and by virtue of that, teachers can bring up real-time weather from their school right there in the classroom on the smart boards. And at Foster, where they already had a weather station, they funded the data logger and the Wi-Fi to keep that, to make that more manageable, where again, that could be streamed into a website that teachers could access more easily.
And we should mention too, you mentioned the smart boards, but we wouldn't have nearly the number of smart boards we
certainly
now
would not.
have if it were not also
Right,
for
right,
that
yeah,
foundation.
yeah.
I know you've had some other grants and grant opportunities from other organizations and agencies that have supported but more secondary programs.
The Hingham Ed, I have to say, they really do promote innovation, in that if a teacher has a creative idea, there is an opportunity for them to explore that creative idea, and it also then becomes an integral part of our program. So in my more than almost 20 years here in town, the Hingham Ed Foundation has funded everything from elementary robotics. They've funded, of course, our school gardens, which we've discussed quite a bit, but that certainly would not have been possible without their support. And also our school PTOs are also extremely generous, again, in funding those seeds of ideas that then can blossom and grow.
I want to pick up on that. I'm glad Katie mentioned the school PTOs because Field Science was the beneficiary of a grant from the Foster PTO, and they funded a set of 12 field scopes, which are really nice, easy to use, kind of sturdy scopes that kids can take out, and which we take out on the trail and take out all the time. We've got a lot of benefit out of those.
Great. Great. So, Jack, you mentioned the nature trail, and you mentioned the gardens and the pond and so on. We are really fortunate that now all 6 of our schools have gardens, new middle school garden as well, and all 4 of our elementary schools have nature trails. And what I remember about my experience in science was that each of the nature trails was really, really unique. And so tell us about that.
Sure, and Hingham is just so fortunate to have so much open space and green space, and that the schools, they've done a great job of creating and then maintaining these green spaces which allow the schools to have trails. Plymouth River, of course, has very deep trails that go through meadows and woodlands, and it has some great glacial features and a cattail swamp and a red maple swamp. And you know, it's home to chipmunks and I understand flying squirrels. Chuck, I've not seen one.
I
yet,
have
but
not
this
seen
is
one.
What we're
It's a
still,
legend.
yeah. We're still holding out hope we'll see one. South has the great Kettle Pond and freshwater swamp and the boardwalks going over that, and the outdoor classroom. In the back of it, Foster's got that great esker, which kind of builds up, is covered with lots of different kinds of trees and builds up and goes all the way to Otis Hill. And because of the diversity of trees, it's a great place to kind of study change of seasons. And then East has 2 nice trails, one of which goes behind the fields and crosses a little stream and has a lot of kind of sumac and has a lot of vines that kind of create some interesting passageways. So it's great going out on those. Students are really excited. I think, Dr. Galley, you mentioned that students don't always have experiences to spend that kind of time in natural areas where they can have these informal experiences in nature. I think when we take out students, and I've taken students out at least 3 times and more, we try to do it every season, and one of the reasons for that is so students can kind of see the change in nature along the trails. But I think these are great because they provide a wonderful context for students to apply the concepts they've learned in their 5th grade curriculum and in field science. So these trails are great settings to really apply their understandings of the water cycle or ecosystems or food webs. And it's also a great way to kind of integrate the skills they've used, like, for example, water testing or tree identification or track reading or using microscopes, and a way for them to kind of soak in nature in a much more informal way. So it's a nice way for them just to be curious about nature. Sometimes when I'm there on the trails, I'll do some interpretive things and point things out to students. And I'm always asking questions. I'm always trying to keep a line of inquiry going by asking. Students will make some observations, and I'll always be pressing them. Well, why do you think it's shaped like that? Why do you think the leaf has that kind of shape? And it gives the kids a way to kind of push their thinking about nature. But it also, I think, promotes a greater awareness of their natural surroundings, a greater appreciation for the environment, and I think a greater understanding of their local place, so it kind of builds that sense of place.
Just a little anecdote about the outdoors and trails and so on, and I don't think any of you, including you, Chuck, were here when we had environmental science over at the depot in the high school. Well, back in the olden days, when we were very, very overcrowded at the high school, before the high school renovation, we had 1,255 students
My goodness.
at the high school, in a 3-year high school, 9, 10, 11, 12, and space was just at a premium. And so we had a program, there was 2-period environmental science program. And there was a building that no longer is there at the depot. And that building had a small classroom in it. And we bused students over there for 2 periods. It got them out of the building, but everything they did there was outdoors and hands-on. And it was, they created some trails. They, in the wintertime, they were tracking animals and doing all kinds of wonderful things. That program went away when we had enough space. We renovated the high school and added on, so the program went away. But that was great for even the older kids. And even then, it surprised me that so many students hadn't had those kinds of experiences in their own lives. So, so that was a wonderful.
It was really ahead of its time. It's there are schools now that are seen as being innovative and cutting edge because they're doing nature-based education. Yeah, and they're seeing all kinds of benefits of students learning and social development because they're spending more time in the outdoors.
Yeah, and we talk so much now. I was reading a report over the weekend about the kind of a next generation high school and a white paper that's been written at the federal level about what high schools would look like, and so much of it is about learning outside the walls of the building.
Right,
and I'd say,
exactly.
gosh, we've done a lot of that.
We've done a lot.
Right. They're having a lot of success with that in preschools. I know in Boston, the Boston Nature Center has a preschool where students are out every day for most of the day.
Yeah, and how important in that urban environment, especially.
Yeah.
So, you know, all of our elementary schools, we're proud of the fact they have the same curriculum and they get all the same kind of support that, in terms of personnel people, like the directors and the science specialists and all the other specialists that we have. But each school has its own unique identity, and they're all known for something. And science is kind of a thing at Plymouth River because of Chuck. And most people who are watching, who are parents, know about the National Seashore trip that you do with all of the fourth graders every year. But Plymouth River was also the school that had the very first garden, as I remember,
it did.
with Holly Hill, and the pond, of course, that's there. And now you have a brand new playground. It's a natural
It's tucked
playground.
away into nature.
So, yeah, so tell us about particularly I want to start with the playground and then about
So the
other
playground,
things you do.
that started several years ago when we started getting into and trying to understand this whole idea around nature deficit disorder and why our children aren't connecting with nature. And
Now say that again.
Nature deficit disorder. Yes, it's a new disorder.
Is that kind of like vertically challenged?
Yes, a
like
little
you
bit.
and I would
like both of us. And so we realized that we're really wired to be in nature, and that kids aren't having these experiences, and that when playing in nature, it doesn't require as much focus. So for kids who may be having other issues in school, it gives them an opportunity to learn in a different way. But we also found out that when playing in nature, that creativity rises. That it's sort of called the loose parts theory. For the number of loose parts there are in a playground or a play area, the more creative kids can be. And so we're finding that kids, if we can get them into nature at recess, climbing on rocks and being around trees, that it has benefits for both their creativity and science. So we built this playground that extends a bit into our nature trail, and we find kids are up against some beautiful white pine, and at the same time very close to some glacial features, some glacial erratics that interest them, and they're doing some interesting things out there that we hope will continue. So that's certainly one unique feature at PRS. The garden is another one that's been there. I think I started it about 12 years ago, and now we're in certainly partnership with Holly Hill. And Brian mentioned the opportunities for application, and that's what we see the garden for, that all grade levels can be out there looking at structure and function of plants, decomposition, soil composition, and mentioning the bees. The whole idea of pollination and the life cycle of plants is certainly covered through that. And our Cape Cod program has been wonderful, and I guess I've been doing that for about 20 years. And it's an opportunity to get kids in the environment, fully immersed for 2 nights and 3 days, in which they're experiencing environments and habitats that they would not normally experience, and in ways that are different. So that line of inquiry continues from waking up at 6:30 in the morning till going to bed at 9 o'clock at night. And we find one of the most rewarding parts about it is those kids who aren't shining academically and within a school setting seem to shine in that environment and have a lot to say and are experiencing some very higher level thinking.
Great. Great.
I have to say that I think at PRS I get the sense that one of the reasons science is so successful and so pervasive is that because Chuck is involved at every level, and I've seen this, I think it's so great that he's still involved in a very, at the bottom floor, i.e. working with kids. You know, I love the Fridays when I'm at Plymouth River because after school I can kind of stop in to see what the kids in Voyagers are doing, and you know, the excitement is so great. It might be 10 kids, but it sounds like 40. And I think it's great that Chuck is still so involved in that that kind of grassroots level of doing science education, even in a real informal way.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that because I think teachers who show excitement for science normally get kids excited. And so when kids know that I'm excited about science, just the other day, a student three girls walked in with a skull of a mammal. And because they normally would say, go see Mr. Cormier because he will tell you what it is. So I couldn't tell them what it was, but so I've got this collection now growing in my office of things kids are bringing in.
Could open
I've
a
seen
museum.
that collection.
It'll be the Hingham Natural Science Museum.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
You know, a number of years ago, I was at an international school in Augsburg, Germany, and I was there for an accreditation visit, so we had a workroom, and I was on the second floor, and outside the workroom, there was just a tiny little patch of grass where the children, and these were perhaps 2nd to 4th graders, went out to play, and I thought, gosh, you know, they don't have any equipment. Isn't that sad? Was my perspective. And then, you know, so each of the days we were there, I would look out, and the children would be there, and there was a little patch of grass, but then there were some I wouldn't even call them woods, because there weren't big trees, some small trees, and I watched the children, and they would be swinging around the trees and picking up leaves and showing each other things and so on. And, you know, I kind of got a new perspective about what was going on. So at the last day, I said to the head of school, I lamented the fact that you didn't have a playground.
Right.
And she said, oh, but we do. And I said, oh, really, where is it? And she said, right outside your window. And that was my first experience with a, by design, play space that was natural. And so that was only perhaps 5 years ago when I came back here, and a couple of years later, we're talking about a natural playground at Plymouth River School. So we have a lot of relationships. We've mentioned Holly Hill a couple of times here, Holly Hill Farm, and they've been instrumental in getting our gardens going, but we have a lot of other relationships with groups and entities and projects. So tell us about a few of those, Katie.
We do. So many to mention that I'm always nervous I'll leave one out, but a few just even within the last few weeks. The North-South River Watershed Association does a wonderful program for our 5th graders in town where they're doing a number of hands-on activities and also visiting our local water treatment plant. And so again, that really gives the real-world connection to the students when they're studying the water cycle. The Hingham Land Conservation Trust has been very generous to our field science program by providing maps to every 5th grader in town of all of the green spaces, and again, hoping to encourage families to get out in
nature. And those are wonderful maps, by the way.
Beautiful
Very
maps,
well done.
and again, really gives you an appreciation for the green space in Hingham and how much people have committed to preserving that green space, and one of the things that makes our community special. Again, the Holly Hill organization, I can't stress enough how much they've impacted our program. The Garden Club of Hingham every year makes a large donation to the Hingham Ed Foundation that helps us to provide that plant-based education. So again, just extremely generous organizations as well as individuals. It seems like anytime we're starting a new program such as engineering, I'll have very casual conversations with parents who may be in the field that result in then coming in to help us either with materials or helping out with lessons or so on. So we have a very strong science community here in town.
Who was it, Katie? I accompanied Katie and members of the Green Team last spring to the Weir River. Was it the Weir River Foundation and Department of Marine, Fisheries who were helping you and the students look for?
Yeah, so the Weir River Watershed Association is another organization that we work with more at the secondary level, but they also have advised on our elementary curriculum as well. So,
Great. So we've been talking for a bit here, rambling somewhat, but anyway, so I'd like to ask each of you to think of something that you think it's essential for our viewers to know, but that I haven't asked you about. So Chuck, we'll start with you.
All right. What I didn't get to chime in on the work of HEF and the PTO, and I think they work collaboratively, and one will provide a grant and the other one will follow with more support resources. And so most recently, maybe 5 years ago, the HEF provided funding for Mad About Science, which is a program I'm running at Plymouth River School that tries to bring non-fictional science text into the hands of kids, and they sort of in a club with me, and they come to me and we talk a little bit about their readings. And most recently, the HEF has funded a muralist to come to our school for a STEAM week that we'll be doing in April, and representing the work we do on STEM activities through art. And so the PTO has followed up with Mad About Science in providing additional funding yearly, and they will also be providing funding for STEAM. So I think that's essential for our programs, at least.
And that's a good point, that the foundation and the PTOs and all the buildings work collaboratively, and often it'll be a joint project.
Exactly.
Terrific. Katie, what do you think?
I think the one piece that we neglected to mention was the family involvement in town. And our students are coming to us with very rich science experiences. So parents are reading science-themed books to their students at home, indulging interest that their students are expressing by, science-themed toys and so on. And also, again, getting out as families into nature, perhaps not as often as all families would like, but those experiences really do make an impact. It allows students to make schema connections between what they're learning in the classroom and the broader world. So whether it's through travel, through reading, through science-based play, that really is an essential part of our curriculum and what makes us a strong program.
Thank you. So Brian, you're the new guy on the block.
Right, yeah. Well, I'm taken by the teacher's role in elementary science. We've talked about how, I think Dr. Galli, you suggested that when you change curriculum, that can be a potential intimidating thing for teachers, especially if they've got used to that. But I have to credit the teachers. They have been they're so great and so thoughtful and so collaborative and flexible that I've found that in working with, we've mentioned the committees where they are kind of democratic members and they give us wonderful input, and then they go back to their schools with great ideas that they share, and they give us wonderful feedback. But they're also very willing. I think they're all excited about doing science. I think they all see the benefits of that. And I think as long as they're convinced that they're going to have support and materials, they're all on for it. And we've seen them in workshops or in services or meetings where they kind of leave very excited. And I think that's great for us to see them bringing that kind of enthusiasm to their schools and their teams, and also passing it on to the students. So I just want to credit them for being so kind of willing and positive during this period where we are introducing new standards, new units, and they've kind of taken that on with a great spirit.
Reminds me, Brian, that on the the more informal science curriculum, that we have gardens and we have wonderful nature trails, but we also in front of PRS have this apple tree that over the last couple of years has taken on a life of its own. So one of my second grade teachers has collected the apples with their students and making applesauce and talking about the tree's life cycle and so forth. So you do get that wonderful interest by
Yeah.
many of our teachers in just little niches in science that can turn kids on.
Right, right. I think that's great when they find a particular interest and their enthusiasm allows them just to run with it and create something great for their students.
And I funded an apple picker for her. It's a long pole that
Oh, it's a pole. I
It's
thought
a
it was a
pole,
person.
yeah.
No.
Right, yeah,
gets
It's
the
a long
apples
pole.
off the tree.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I certainly, too, didn't want to be remiss in just saying that we have enjoyed the support of the highest levels of administration in town for science. Many districts are short-sighted,
Right.
and they're hyper-focused on literacy and math, not realizing that science is a fantastic way to hook a reluctant reader who may not be as interested in literacy, a fantastic way to support what's going on in math. And so, again, we have enjoyed support from the highest levels of administration, so we appreciate that.
And with that, thank all of you for joining me today.
Thank you.
And I would like to say to our audience, stay tuned for the next episodes in our series, the Superintendent Spotlight. Over the next several episodes, we'll be talking about special education, about security, school security, and our school resource officers, and also about elementary foreign language. So I hope you will join us again. Thank you.